Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live coverage of the fourth day of the Afrexim Bank annual meetings. Of course, officially it's the third in the manner of speaking. Of course, we had the opening plenaries on Wednesday. But if you add all the pre-events of a Tuesday in terms of media briefing, the meetings, delegates, and all that, of course, we're cruising towards the end of the 2025 annual meetings of this DFI in the manner of speaking. So let's just move on and just give you a quick run through where we finished off on Thursday, with the African Renaissance being the big story here with Nigeria's former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, who is the ambassador for the intra-Africa trade, and the Afrexim Bank, speaking on the fireside chat some of the key issues returning or pulling back Africa's economic growth. And he spoke to quite a number of issues. President Obasanjo also headlined about 10 African countries that he believes should be the champions of Africa's economy and take others along into taking the continent a lot higher. We've also discussed the role of multilaterals and how they can work together to ensure that Africans get a better share and reach that target of 3.4 trillion US dollars trade potential that the continent really has. That's making Africa finance work for Africa. We've heard from several key speakers, including the head of the Economic Commission for Africa, Clever Gatete, Wamkele Mene, who's the head of the EFCFTA Secretariat, and the central bank governors from Zimbabwe, from Egypt, from Nigeria, the central bank governor from the island of Barbados on the Indian Ocean. So been quite a whole lot of Africa's Renaissance, getting finance, getting the private sector of finance institutions to also support the government and what others are doing. So that's been where we've gone through over the last few days. Now we're getting towards the end. Today's the closing plenaries, as it were. And before we touch on that, the key focus has been the resilience over the last 32 years and the legacies of the outgoing president of Afrexim Bank, Professor Benedict Oramah, who spent 10 years in the saddle. What's next for Afrexim Bank? How much has been done over the last 10 years? And I caught up with the executive vice president of the DFI, Ms. Kanayo Awani, here at the event and in an exclusive chat with a Frontier Africa report. This was what she told me about how much has been achieved under Benedict Oramah and what to look at for moving forward. Let's take a listen.
30 years of resilience, of dealing with the resilience comes from being a child of necessity, dealing with pervasive market failures, going from one crisis to another. And then in the last 10 years, we decided to take a bold step to say, this continent of ours, we have to transform it. The future is about working hard on the journey we started, the journey of transforming Africa. And that journey has a long way to go. But we've done a lot. And it's also a time, as we reflect on these 32 years, also a time to, at some point, pat ourselves on the back for a job well done. For a job well done under the leadership of Professor Oramah, for visionary leadership, for strategy and implementation, for the work we've done. And if I talk about my specific cluster, in growing intra-African trade, in making it pivotal to this, I'm making our bank to this pivotal to the African economy, and also being systemic and relevant to the African continent. And also, in all of this, we've seen in the innovations like the Pan-African payment and settlement systems, we've seen platforms that have helped to break barriers and the boundaries that have been put up to divide us, like the Traffic and Trade Fair. We've seen it in our digital assets. We've seen it in our industrial parks. We've seen it in our trading company initiative to ensure that Africa becomes industrialized, because there's no intra-African trade. There's no looking within without industrialization. We made forays into the Caribbean as well, in the diaspora, because we defined very early on, we knew that it was not just about 30 years of resilience, of about trade amongst African countries. What about every African? And trade between Africa and its citizens, wherever they are.
Vice President at African Export-Import Bank. Of course, these are annual meetings, but of course, there were a couple of deal signings as well. There were 4 yesterday across various sectors. Some of them in the banking sector across Africa. They've got an energy company in Nigeria also signed about a $4 million initial capital with Afrexim Bank, which of course is expected to catalyze up $250 million in further FDI inflow into Nigeria to support the energy sector, and that will be expected to bring on board about 500 megawatts of electricity around the southwest part of the country. So that's part of what we've seen over the last few days here. But today, go to the closing formalities. We expect Nigeria's President Oramah Tinubu, who of course is the chief host for Nigeria for hosting this event, to be here later in the afternoon. Of course, there'll also be a fireside chat with Aliko Dangote, the Africa's richest man, who will speak about resilience in building industrial manufacturing capacity in Africa. He will be speaking later this morning, as well as Nigeria's Finance Minister Wale Edu, and of course a couple of other big names, including some commissioners from the African Union as well. And then the Afrexim Bank, of course, will be hosting his annual shareholders meeting tomorrow. We're expected to hear who will be replacing Benedict Oramah as the head of the DFI. So we've got a whole lot on our plate as we move towards the weekend and the end of the 2025 annual meetings of Afrexim Bank. So just follow us up on our social media and on our YouTube at Frontier Africa Reports as well. I am Bosin Omofoye reporting from Abuja.